From a house that burned down twice in 1 year to a California beach masquerading as the South Pacific, the sets and locations of I Dream of Jeannie were filled with Hollywood magic and mishaps. The iconic 1960s sitcom created an entire Florida world without ever leaving California, recycled rival show sets, and even accidentally left mountains visible in supposedly flat Florida. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the I Dream of Jeannie beach house. Fact 1. The beach house lived many lives. Before Jeannie. Before Major Tony Nelson and his magical Jeannie called this house home, the charming two-story residence on Blondie Street had already starred in several other classic television shows. The house was originally constructed sometime between 1938 and 1941, specifically for the Blondie movie serials, which were based on the popular comic strip about Blondie and Dagwood Bumstead. What makes this even more interesting is that the studio didn't just design the house from scratch, they actually modeled it after a real home that existed on Agnes Street in Burbank, California, bringing a touch of authentic neighborhood charm to the Hollywood backlot. After the Blondie films wrapped up, this versatile facade began its impressive second career in television. The house first became famous as the Anderson family home in Father Knows Best, which ran from 1954 to 1963 and showed audiences what the ideal American family looked like during that era. The same structure then transitioned to playing Mr. Wilson's house in Dennis the Menace from 1959 to 1963, where it became the backdrop for countless scenes of the mischievous Dennis causing trouble for his long-suffering neighbor. By the time I Dream of Jeannie premiered in 1965, this hardworking house was ready for yet another role. With some cosmetic changes and fresh paint, it transformed into Major Nelson's bachelor pad at 1020 Palm Drive in Cocoa Beach, Florida. At least that's where viewers were told it was located. In reality, the house never left its spot on the Columbia Ranch backlot in Burbank, proving that in Hollywood, one house can live many lives across different shows and decades. Fact 2. Cocoa Beach was 2,500 miles away. Despite the show's constant references to Cocoa Beach, Florida, and Cape Kennedy, the cast and crew of I Dream of Jeannie spent virtually no time in the Sunshine State during production. The entire series was filmed in California, with Major Nelson's house exteriors shot at the Warner Ranch in Burbank and all the interior scenes filmed at Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood. This meant that everything viewers saw taking place in sunny Florida was actually happening on the other side of the country, roughly 2,500 miles away from where the story was supposedly set. The show went to great lengths to maintain the illusion of a Florida setting, making frequent mentions of Cocoa Beach throughout its 5-season run. The town was referenced 81 times in total, according to television historians. The production team used California locations that could pass for Florida, creating an entire fictional world without ever needing to leave Los Angeles. The Warner Ranch in Burbank provided the neighborhood exteriors, while Sunset Gower Studios offered the controlled environment needed for the detailed interior sets where Jeannie would appear and disappear in her signature puff of pink smoke. Interestingly, the cast and crew only made 2 actual visits to Florida during the show's entire run from 1965 to 1970, and both trips happened in 1969. The first visit occurred in June, when a parade in Cocoa Beach escorted Barbara Eden and the rest of the cast to City Hall for a publicity event. The second trip came later that year when the cast returned to promote the episode where Tony and Jeannie finally got married. These brief Florida appearances were purely for publicity purposes, proving that Hollywood could successfully convince millions of viewers that California was Florida without ever really going there. Fact 3. Hollywood Hills kept photobombing, Florida. One of the most obvious giveaways that I Dream of Jeannie wasn't actually filmed in Florida appeared right there in the background of numerous episodes. The Hollywood Hills and California mountains were clearly visible in shots that were supposed to show flat, sea-level Cocoa Beach. Anyone familiar with Florida's geography knows that the state is remarkably flat, especially around the Space Coast area where the show was set, making these mountain ranges an impossible feature that sharp-eyed viewers couldn't help but notice. Bill Daly, who played Major Roger Healy on the show, openly acknowledged this geographical impossibility with good humor in later interviews. He pointed out that if you look at some of those old episodes, it's supposed to be shot in Cocoa Beach, but in the background you have mountains, specifically the Hollywood Hills. This wasn't just a one-time mistake that slipped through editing. The mountains appeared in multiple episodes throughout the series, becoming an unintentional running joke for observant fans who caught the continuity error. The problem was practically unavoidable given where the show filmed its exterior scenes. The Warner Ranch in Burbank sits in the San Fernando Valley, surrounded by the natural landscape of Southern California, which includes plenty of hills and mountain ranges. When the Bellows family drove up to their house in one episode, mountains were plainly visible in the background. And when Tony and Jeannie left for a camping trip in another episode, a big hill could be seen behind them. The production team either didn't notice these geographical inconsistencies or simply decided that most viewers wouldn't care enough about the mistake to let it ruin their enjoyment of the show's magical storylines. Fact 4. The beach house burned down twice in 1970. 1970 turned out to be a catastrophic year for the Warner Ranch, with a series of devastating fires that destroyed significant portions of the famous backlot where I Dream of Jeannie and many other classic shows were filmed. 3 separate fires broke out during that year, in January, April, and August, causing extensive damage to Blondie Street and the surrounding areas. The Blondie house, which served as Major Nelson's home on the show, was damaged in these fires and ended up burning down twice during this terrible stretch, forcing the studio to rebuild the structure that had stood since the late 1930s. The fires didn't just affect the Blondie house. They devastated a quarter of the entire lot, destroying half of the western set, the colonial and European set, and multiple buildings on Blondie Street. The church that appeared in numerous episodes also burned down, along with the Partridge family house, which had to be rebuilt in a different configuration. After each fire, the studio rushed to reconstruct the damaged sets because several shows, including Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, Here Come the Brides, and The Partridge Family, were still in active production and needed those locations to continue filming. When the Blondie house was finally rebuilt after suffering damage in multiple fires, it lost much of its original 1938 structure and character. The house that viewers see in later episodes and that still stands today at the Warner Ranch is not the same building that was originally constructed for the Blondie serials. It's essentially a reconstruction that was modified throughout the years, including the addition of a fake brick facade that was put on around 1974 to give it a more updated appearance. Fact 5. The pilot episode was freezing cold. The iconic pilot episode of I Dream of Jeannie opens with astronaut Tony Nelson stranded on a deserted tropical island where he discovers a mysterious bottle containing a beautiful genie. But the reality behind the cameras was far less comfortable than it appeared on screen. The beach scenes were filmed at Zuma Beach in Malibu, California from December 2nd through December 4th in 1964, right in the middle of winter when Southern California beach temperatures are decidedly chilly. Barbara Eden, wearing her famous pink harem costume with a midriff-bearing top, spent those 3 days shivering in the cold while the cameras rolled. Eden later admitted in interviews that she was freezing during the entire scene, even though the finished episode makes it look like a sunny, warm day in a tropical paradise. The winter timing meant that despite California's reputation for pleasant weather, the beach was cold enough to make filming quite uncomfortable for the actress, who had very little clothing, to protect her from the December chill. The production schedule didn't allow for waiting until warmer months, so Eden and the crew simply had to push through the uncomfortable conditions to capture the scenes that would introduce audiences to Jeannie's magical world. Despite the physical discomfort of filming in the cold, Eden has said that this pilot episode beach scene remained one of her favorite scenes to film throughout the entire series. The location at Zuma Beach proved so memorable that when the cast returned to film the 1985 reunion movie, I Dream of Jeannie, 15 years later, Barbara Eden and Wayne Rogers went back to that exact same Malibu Beach location to recreate the magic of that original cold December day 21 years earlier. Fact 6. NASA offices were really Edwards Air Force Base. When viewers saw Major Tony Nelson and Major Roger Healy heading into their NASA offices on the show, they were actually looking at a building that was nowhere near Cape Kennedy or the Florida Space Coast. The exterior shots of the astronauts' workplace were filmed at the NASA Dryden Flight Research Center, which was located at Edwards Air Force Base north of Los Angeles in the California desert. This facility, which was renamed the Armstrong Flight Research Center in 2014, served as the stand-in for the Florida NASA headquarters throughout the entire series. The building itself was quite recognizable to anyone familiar with aerospace history, as it featured the historic X-1E rocket plane mounted on a pedestal right out front, creating a dramatic and authentic-looking entrance for the supposed Florida location. This experimental aircraft, with the serial number 46-063, appears in several episodes and became an unintentional landmark that connected the show to real aerospace research, even though it was sitting in California rather than Florida. The main building at the Dryden Flight Research Center had an impressive official government look that perfectly suited the show's needs for establishing shots of where the astronauts spent their working hours. Visitors to the actual Dryden facility often recognize the entrance to the main building, not because they had been there before, but because they had seen it countless times on television reruns of I Dream of Jeannie. The mountain-dotted exterior shots filmed at Edwards Air Force Base provided yet another California landscape that was supposed to represent Florida landmarks around Kennedy Space Center and Patrick Air Force Base, adding to the show's long list of geographical substitutions that most viewers never questioned while watching Tony and Jeannie's magical adventures. Fact 7. Dr. Bellows lived in the Bewitched house. In one of the most unusual examples of set sharing in television history, Dr. Alfred Bellows and his wife Amanda lived in the exact same house, exterior that was used for Samantha and Darren Stevens on the rival sitcom Bewitched, the Says. Iconic house at 1164 Morning Glory Circle, which Bewitched fans knew as the Stevens family home, doubled as the Bellows residence on I Dream of Jeannie, creating a strange overlap between two competing shows that were both vying for viewers with their magical female leads and supernatural storylines. This unusual arrangement was possible because both shows were produced by Screen Gems and filmed at the Warner Ranch in Burbank, making it practical and cost-effective to share the same exterior facades even though the shows were technically in competition with each other. The house, known as the Higgins House on the ranch, was originally constructed in 1962 for the television show Our Man Higgins, before becoming famous as the Stevens home starting in 1964 when I Dream of Jeannie needed an exterior for Dr. Bellows' house. Just a year later, the production team simply used the same structure that was already serving as the home of their rival show's main characters. The arrangement became even more interesting when both shows were filming simultaneously on the Warner Ranch backlot, meaning that for 2 seasons, the same house was appearing on television each week as 2 different residences on 2 different networks. Viewers watching both shows in the mid to late 1960s might have noticed the familiar facade appearing in episodes of both series, though most people likely didn't realize they were looking at the exact same building, playing 2 different homes for 2 different sets of television characters. Fact 8. Interior sets were recycled between rival shows. The set sharing between Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie went far beyond just using the same exterior house facade. The rivalry between these 2 magical sitcoms didn't prevent the production teams from recycling actual interior sets as well. In some episodes of I Dream of Jeannie, the crew used the real interior sets from Bewitched to create Dr. Bellows' home, making modifications to disguise the familiar rooms that viewers might recognize from the other show. One of the most notable changes involved in closing the famous open staircase from the Stevens home behind a wall, transforming the iconic Bewitched architectural feature into something that looked completely different for the Bellows residents. The furniture recycling between the 2 shows was even more blatant and easier to spot for eagle-eyed viewers who watched both series. The distinctive avocado and gold-flowered sofa that appeared in the Stevens living room on Bewitched also showed up in Alfred and Amanda Bellows' living room on I Dream of Jeannie, proving that Screen Gems was more than willing to save money by moving the same props between their competing productions. This wasn't just a one-time occurrence. Various pieces of furniture and other set decorations moved back and forth between the two shows throughout their overlapping runs. The practice of sharing sets and props between Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie was possible because both shows filmed their interior scenes at Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, which was located many miles away from the Warner Ranch where the exterior shots were filmed. This meant that when Bewitched wasn't using their living room set for filming, the I Dream of Jeannie crew could dress it up differently and use it for their own purposes, creating an efficient system of resource sharing that benefited both productions despite their competitive relationship. Fact 9. The entire set was burned after cancellation. When I Dream of Jeannie was canceled in 1970 after 5 seasons on the air, the producers faced a decision about what to do with all the elaborate interior sets, furniture, and props that had been used to create the show's magical world. Rather than paying the considerable expense of storing everything in a warehouse, they made the decision to simply burn it all to the ground, allowing cast members to take home whatever pieces they wanted before the rest went up in flames. This might sound shocking by today's standards, but burning sets and props after a show ended was actually a very common practice in Hollywood at the time, as studios considered storage costs too high for items that would likely never be used again. The cast and crew were given the opportunity to salvage whatever they could carry away before the destruction began, leading to a chaotic scene where everyone rushed to grab mementos from the show they had worked on for years. Barbara Eden managed to save the most important prop of all, her iconic Jeannie bottle, which she wisely kept in a bank vault for safekeeping before eventually donating it to the Smithsonian Institution in 2011. Beyond the bottle and a few other small items that cast members grabbed, virtually nothing else survived the fire. Looking back, it's almost impossible to imagine how much money those set pieces and props would be worth today if they had been preserved. Items from classic television shows now fetch enormous prices at auction, and I Dream of Jeannie memorabilia is particularly sought after by collectors. The furniture, costumes, and set decorations that seemed disposable in 1970 would have been priceless artifacts of television history if they had survived, making the decision to burn everything a particularly painful loss for fans and historians alike. Fact 10. The beach house now serves as an office. Unlike the interior sets that were destroyed by fire after the show's cancellation, Major Nelson's beach house exterior managed to survive and still stands today at the Warner Ranch in Burbank, California, though it now serves a much more mundane purpose than housing a magical genie and her astronaut master. The famous facade that appeared in hundreds of episodes has been converted into the ranch operations office, where the daily business of managing the studio lot takes place instead of the comedic hijinks that once made the building famous to millions of television viewers around the world. The house has undergone some modifications over the decades to keep it functional as an actual working office building rather than just a hollow television facade. The most significant change came around 1974 when a fake brick exterior was added to the structure, giving it a different appearance than the painted wood siding that viewers saw during the show's original run from 1965 to 1970. Despite this cosmetic update and various other minor renovations needed to maintain the building's structural integrity over the years, the overall shape and character of the house remains remarkably similar to how it looked during its television heyday. Fans who have been fortunate enough to visit the Warner Ranch on studio tours or special events have been able to see the building in person and recognize it immediately, even with the brick facade that replaced the original exterior treatment. The house stands as a living piece of television history, one of the few tangible connections that still exists to the magical world of I Dream of Jeannie, after so much of the show's physical legacy was lost to fires and deliberate destruction, quietly continuing its service to the entertainment industry in a new administrative capacity. Fact 11. Interiors and exteriors were miles apart. The production schedule for I Dream of Jeannie was significantly more complicated than it needed to be, because the cast and crew had to constantly travel between two separate filming locations that were about 20 to 30 minutes apart. All of the exterior shots showing Major Nelson's neighborhood and the outside of his house were filmed at the Warner Ranch in Burbank, while every single interior scene including all those moments where Jeannie magically appeared in the living room or caused chaos in the kitchen, had to be filmed at Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, requiring the entire production to pack up and move locations multiple times during each filming day. This logistical challenge wasn't necessary for every show filming at the Warner Ranch during that era. The Partridge family, which also used the ranch for their exterior shots and even had their house right next door to Major Nelson's on Blondie Street, had a much easier production process because they were one of the few shows that could film both interior and exterior scenes at the same facility. The Partridge family had their interior sets built right there on sound stages at the ranch itself, meaning the cast and crew only needed to walk a few minutes to get from the house exterior to the living room set, rather than making the half-hour drive across town that the I Dream of Jeannie team faced constantly. This separation between filming locations meant that I Dream of Jeannie couldn't take advantage of the convenience that the Partridge family enjoyed, where actors could quickly move between indoor and outdoor scenes without losing valuable production time to travel. The added complexity of shuttling cast, crew, and equipment between Burbank and Hollywood made every filming day longer and more expensive than it would have been if everything had been located in one place. Fact 12, Bull Blondie Street was completely demolished in 2023 after serving as the backdrop for countless iconic television shows and movies spanning nearly 9 decades. The entire Blondie Street backlot met its end in October of 2023 when demolition crews leveled everything to make way for modern office buildings and new sound stages. The famous curved residential street that had been home to television's most beloved families, including Major Nelson and Jeannie, Samantha and Darren Stevens from Bewitched, and the musical Partridge family, was completely destroyed, with all the historic house facades torn down and removed from the property that had been a cornerstone of Hollywood production since the 1930s. The demolition was part of a $500 million redevelopment project led by investment firms after they acquired the Warner Ranch property, obtaining a loan of $480 million to finance the massive transformation of the lot. The new owners decided that the best use of the valuable Burbank real estate was to replace the nostalgic neighborhood setting with 16 new sound stages, office buildings, and parking areas that would be leased to Warner Brothers and other production companies. The brownstone facades, the swimming pool, and the park area that had appeared in so many memorable scenes were all paved over to create space for these modern facilities. By the time the demolition was completed on October 26, 2023, almost nothing remained of the television history that had been created there. Only the sound stages at the back of the lot and a single church facade near where the Bewitched house once stood survived the destruction. During the demolition process, an episode of Young Sheldon was even filmed on location, depicting a tornado causing damage to the neighborhood in a strangely fitting farewell to the backlot that had entertained generations of television viewers. Fact 13. The Beach Island returned for the reunion. When production began on the 1985 reunion movie, I Dream of Jeannie, 15 years later, the filmmakers made a deliberate decision to return to the exact same beach location where the magic had started more than 2 decades earlier. Barbara Eden and her new co-star Wayne Rogers, who was filling in for Larry Hagman as Tony Nelson, traveled to Zuma Beach in Malibu, California to film their beach rescue scene at the precise spot where the original pilot episode had been shot way back in December of 1964. This nostalgic choice created a full-circle moment that connected the reunion movie directly to the show's origins 21 years earlier. The decision to return to Zuma Beach wasn't just about convenience or finding a suitable coastal location. It was a meaningful gesture that honored the show's history and gave Barbara Eden the chance to relive one of her favorite filming experiences from the original series. Standing on that same stretch of Malibu sand where she had first emerged from the bottle as the 2,000-year-old Jeannie, Eden was able to recreate the magic of that initial discovery scene, though this time hopefully under warmer conditions than the freezing December weather she had endured during the pilot. The reunion movie was filmed at the Burbank Studios from April 24 through May of 1985, but the production team specifically scheduled time to take Eden and Rogers on location to Zuma Beach to capture those important beach scenes. The choice to use the same location demonstrated how significant that original Malibu beach setting had been to establishing the show's identity, and it gave longtime fans a sense of continuity and nostalgia as they watched Jeannie and Tony's story continue in a new chapter. Fact 14. The ranch had a lagoon that disappeared. The Warner Ranch wasn't just a collection of suburban house facades and city streets. It also featured a large lagoon and beach area that provided a versatile filming location for water scenes in numerous television shows and movies, including several episodes of I Dream of Jeannie, where viewers got really good looks at this impressive water feature. The lagoon sat on one corner of the multi-acre lot, positioned on the opposite side from many of the residential sets, and it served as a tropical paradise, romantic waterfront, or mysterious body of water, depending on what the script required for any given production. The lagoon's fate was sealed by the series of catastrophic fires that struck the Warner Ranch in 1970, which damaged not only the house facades on Blondie Street, but also affected the infrastructure and usability of other areas of the lot, including the water features. After the fires, the studio faced difficult decisions about which parts of the backlot were worth maintaining and which would be too expensive to restore. And unfortunately, the lagoon fell into the category of expendable features that didn't justify the cost of upkeep and maintenance. Eventually, the decision was made to fill in the lagoon completely and repurpose that valuable piece of real estate for commercial development. Where the lagoon once provided a scenic backdrop for television magic, a mini-mall was constructed at the intersection of North Hollywood Way and West Verdugo Avenue, replacing the water and beach area with parking lots and retail spaces. This transformation from a filming location that had appeared in countless productions to a mundane shopping center represented the practical realities of land. Mayu's in Los Angeles, where even historic pieces of Hollywood's golden age had to give way to modern commercial development. Fact 15. 3 houses were original 1930s structures. While many of the buildings on Blondie Street were rebuilt, modified, or replaced over the decades due to fires and changing production needs, 3 remarkable structures managed to survive from the very beginning of the Columbia Ranch all the way until the final demolition in 2023. The Little Egbert House, the Lindsay House, which was best known as the Hazel Home, and the Oliver House, which served as the Donna Reed family residence, were all original constructions dating back to the ranch's establishment between 1935 and 1937, making them authentic witnesses to nearly 90 years of television and film history. The Oliver House was particularly significant because it was named after the Marge Oliver character from the 1935 movie Party Wire, which holds the distinction of being the very first movie ever filmed at the Columbia Ranch. This house was constructed around early 1935 and was later moved from its original location to its permanent spot on Blondie Street, where it went on to appear in The Donna Reed Show starting in 1958 and Dennis the Menace beginning in 1959, along with countless other productions over the decades. The Lindsay House, which television audiences knew as the home of Hazel and the Baxter family, was built in 1936 and appeared in numerous early film serials, including The Three Stooges, Batman, and Superman productions throughout the 1930s and 40s. The Little Egbert House, though technically located on its own small street called Little Egbert Street, rather than directly on Blondie Street itself, was also an original structure that fortunately escaped damage from the devastating 1970 fire that destroyed so many other buildings. All 3 of these historic facades stood as living monuments to Hollywood's golden age until they were finally torn down in the 2023 demolition that erased nearly a century of entertainment history.